contributor, author of the DB API module. He's going to give us an overview of the Parrot VM, some Perl 5, Perl 6, and hopefully dispel any nasty myths and rumours we may have possibly heard about Perl. Thank you very much, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Ooh, that's a little loud, but he's wandered off. Is that better? Okay, great. How many of you use Perl regularly? Show of hands, come on, wake yourselves up after lunch. One, wow. How long have you been using Perl?
A couple of years.
A couple of years, okay, great. And the rest of you don't use Perl at all? Excellent. So you're probably loaded with myths and rumours and misinformation. Fabulous. Just the audience that I need. Okay, until about 3 hours ago, I thought this was a 45-minute talk. So I ended up having to cut out a lot of the Parrot Perl 6 stuff. And then 3 hours ago, I discovered that it wasn't a 45-minute talk, so I was busy stuffing them back in. So the main focus of this, the kind of the glossy stuff, is all Perl, and then there's a bit of Parrot and Perl 6 tacked on the end. Okay, this talk it's really, I want to make the point that I'm positive about Perl. I'm not negative about other languages. Use the language that you have the skill base for. If you've got excellent Ruby developers, do it in Ruby. You've got excellent Python, do it in Python, whatever. Okay, who am I? I'm the author of the Perl DBI module. That's what I'm best known for. I've been working in Perl for 17 years. And I was in charge of the 5.4 maintenance releases for my sins. Now, somehow Perl has accumulated a lot of myths in recent years. And my thinking behind that is that basically Perl has become very mature. The community is busy but quiet. We're not great at creating buzz around ourselves. So I want to look at a few myths. And these are kind of the main ones. Again, like I say, I kind of skipped the Parrot and Perl 6 ones. They'll come at the end. There's plenty of myths around those. But these are the three that I want to look at. Would any of you subscribe to these myths? Number two. There you go. Are they all myths that you've heard in the community? Yeah, there you go. Okay. Sorry? Yeah, the second one is the most common. Yeah, that's what most people say. So it's the one I devote the most time to. Okay, Perl is dead. Perl 5, 21 years old. Perl 5 is 14 years old. Now ask yourselves how many times Microsoft has changed technology in the past 14 years, or even 21 years. So it's a mature language with a mature culture around it. Celebrated its 20th birthday recently. And this is the way Larry Wall likes to think of the Perl versions. And you can see where he's going with this particular slide. This was from his 2006 State of the Onion speech, which he gives at OSCON every year. If you want to get an understanding of Perl and the philosophy behind it, if you read Larry Wall's State of the Onion speeches, which you'll find on the web, it gives a very, very good insight into the thinking and the culture in Perl. Now, the thing is, Perl isn't great at generating buzz. It's just getting on with the job. And there's this sense in the web development community especially that there are no Perl jobs out there. And I think part of the problem with that is that the web development community tends to wear blinkers. Guess the languages. What's the black line? That should be easy. Yep. The orange line? Perl. And the green and the blue. Green is Ruby, blue is Python. Now, but these are web developer jobs. Now, this is US focused, of course, and Ireland may be a little different, but hopefully the message is essentially the same. In the web development world, Perl has huge install base, but it isn't growing as fast as the others. But let's take a broader view. Let's look at software engineering. You've got to add together, because here I've got software engineering and software development. So the top two lines are both Perl. If you add those together, you can see Perl is way ahead of Python and Ruby. I'm not talking about PHP here because I view PHP as very much a niche language, albeit a very big niche. Perl, Python, Ruby are essentially competitors in the general purpose dynamic language space. But let's narrow it down a bit further and look at developer jobs, Perl developer versus Python developer versus Ruby. And here you can see Perl is just way up there. And that's an indication of the maturity of the job market. You could argue that Python and Ruby are too new to have an installed base of developer jobs. But on the other hand, they've been around for a few years now. You'd expect if they were really mainstream languages, there'd be many more Ruby developer jobs. Okay, massive module market. A lot of people don't really appreciate the size of the developer community that is behind. Let me step back a little bit. Whatever language you have, the real value in terms of productivity comes from the libraries available for it. Okay? Nobody in their right mind would invent everything from scratch. These days it's about pulling in modules, gluing them together in any language. And what Perl has going for it is a massive module library. 14,000 distributions. Now that's packages containing many modules. 6,400 authors. Now those are people who just make releases. Behind them there could be a whole community of people contributing to those modules. Thousands of new releases every month. Now these are some of the gems. You'll hear comments sometimes that CPAN is full of terrible modules, rubbish stuff. And it's true, you know, if you have 54,000 modules, a lot of them aren't going to be all that good. But a lot of them are gems. There's some real quality stuff out there because there's a lot of companies, as we saw earlier, using Perl in production environments. So obviously database stuff, datetime module. The datetime module is probably the most thorough, sophisticated and complete implementation of datetime handling in any language. Moose, a new object system for Perl 5. Perhaps one of the most exciting things to come out in Perl 5 following the work that's being done on Perl 6. It's basically a Perl 6 inspired object system. Catalyst, Ruby on Rails competitor, was there first, many more features, different philosophy, but very good. I won't bother going through the rest. The last two lines I'll be looking at in a little while. So CPAN, this is where all these modules live. Comprehensive Perl Archive Network, 360 mirrors in 51 regions. I think we can call that comprehensive. Now one of the reasons why there are so many developers is because this is a mature community. This is a message I want to get across. Every time you upload a new distribution to CPAN, you get the global distribution archiving. Namespace ownership and management. First come, first served. You upload a module with a namespace, a particular namespace, you get that namespace. If you upload a module with somebody else's namespace, you won't get indexed. You can upload it, but it won't be found by people searching. You automatically get bug tracking queue, you automatically get a forum, and you automatically get smoke testing on many platforms. I'll show you more of that shortly. So this is the face of CPAN. Obviously you can download stuff, you can browse well-formatted and interlinked documentation. And you also have links into these forums, the bug trackings, the ratings, annotated documentation. That's community annotation of documentation. Dependency analysis, smoke tests. 550,000 unique visitors. That's probably going to be 600, 700,000 in a while because I only added Google Analysis tracking about 3 weeks ago. So in these last 3 weeks, 550,000 unique visitors. So here's what a page looks like for a particular module. Obviously there are, a particular distribution, and there are 14,000 distributions available. Now that's discounting versions of distributions. So you see that second line there, other releases. You can pull that drop down and see all the other releases that the developer is keeping available on CPAN. Got links to discussion forums, the bug tracking, dependencies, CPAN testing, I'll show you more about that later, community ratings, licensing, and then a list of all the modules and documentation. Okay, now one of the things you'll hear about CPAN is that it's a dependency hell. You know, you identify a particular module you want, you download it, and you find it needs 5 others. And each of those need 5 others, and each of those need 5 others. And You know, a lot of people complain about this dependency hell, that you want one module and it sucks in 500 others. Well, at least now it's very easy to see what the implications, that dependency tree is, and what the risks are. So in this case, this is Moose. These are the dependencies of Moose, and you can see that there's no problem installing those in terms of failures on particular platforms. Now, some modules will have failures on particular platforms, and you can narrow this view down to a particular version of Perl and a particular platform to see whether your version of Perl on your platform suffers more or less than the others. So this goes a long way to resolving the dependency issue. How active is this community? 600,000-ish. That last 2008 is extrapolated from 1 month's data, so it's possibly a little high, but you're looking at 600 uploads a month of new distributions. Now, I defy anybody to tell me that Perl as a language is dead. You know, this is accelerating. Perl is dead. Blessed. Okay. Any questions? Great. It's moving right along. Okay, so we have a few of you believing this. This is where the expression you can write Fortran in any language comes from. And it's true, you can write Fortran in any language. And at the beginning of the article there's this quote. And that's a quote at the beginning of this article in the ACMQ journal. But it's false. There is an obfuscated Perl contest, and it's a very good one. And you see some amazing things that just would blow your mind. So I recommend you go and find the entries for the obfuscated Perl contest, because they are mind-blowing. This is much more true. Whatever language you write in, your job is to do the best you can. And this is Larry Wall's view. And this is kind of an important point about the role of developers and the responsibility you have as a developer to produce clean code. There's nothing in Perl stopping you producing clean code. I shall go back slightly, because the point I want to make here is that with freedom comes responsibility. You can write poorly in any language. You can write beautiful code in Perl. Okay, and I think one of the reasons why Perl has got this reputation of having hard to read code is that the culture it comes out of and the age that it came from is such that it kind of exploded in the dot-com boom, became hugely popular for writing websites, but at the time the culture hadn't matured about the responsibility of writing good quality code. So the other languages like Python and Ruby are much newer, and the community that developed around them had a more modern sense of software development. So I think it's entirely unfair, and I'll show you the tools that are available for dealing with the issue. Best practices came out in 2005, 256 individual guidelines of best practices. Amazing book, well worth reading if you do development in any language, but especially Perl. Basically it encapsulates the best practices that have evolved within the community. Now, if you have to maintain a large code base that is less than optimal, Perl Tidy is the tool you need. Perl Code Beautifier supports a huge number of options for styling the code the way you particularly like, and there's a Perl Best Practices has a set of recommended options that is what they propose as kind of a recommended style. And the wonderful thing about the Perl Best Practices book is that in any team you always have arguments about what style to use. Who's had an argument about what style to use for coding? Yeah. With a book like Perl Best Practices, you can simply say, well, let's just do that. Okay? Not everyone will agree on everything, but having the team agree on something, even if some disagree, it's more important to have the team agree on something. So Perl Best Practices gives you an easy way of saying, well, let's just do that. So you've tidied your code up, you now have beautiful code. But is it, so it's syntactically beautiful, but is it semantically beautiful? Perl Critic is a static code analyzer. 120 policies supplied, most based on Perl Best Practices book. So you can use this to analyze your code base and have it point out things where you're not following best practice. And these are often places where you're likely to have bugs, or bugs will be introduced during maintenance. These 120 policies configurable into levels and themes, so you can focus on particular areas. It's also very easy to extend them and create custom policies to suit your particular environment. So you now have beautiful code, you have semantically beautiful code, but does it work? Now, Perl has an amazing culture for testing. And it's grown up, especially in the last, say, 5 to 10 years. It has very mature tools. Now, one of the test anything protocol that came out of the Perl community, it basically separates the generation of test pass fail from consuming that data and producing summaries. There are 200 test distributions, not modules, 200 test-related distributions on CPAN that make it easy to do any kind of testing that you need to do. There'll be a test module that will make it easy, that will abstract it to the level where you only have to write a couple of lines of code. And that's the important thing when writing, it's an important thing when writing tests. So now you've got pretty code, you've got code following best practices, you've got code that is well tested, but how much of that code, how much of your code base is actually being exercised by those tests? Well, you need to do coverage analysis, and that's what develop cover does. Gives you statement, branch, even condition level coverage analysis, and even does coverage of documentation, pod documentation. And it produces nice drawdown reports. So here, for example, you can get coverage analysis reports of most of the main modules available on CPAN. So you've got this web page, and you can see the statement, branch, condition, subroutine, and pod coverage. And then you can zoom in on a particular one. Here's algorithm dependency. And you can zoom in further to look at a particular file and to see it's showing you here which statements have been executed, what percentage branch coverage you have. So you can see on that line 226, you've only exercised half the branches. Okay, and that OR is counting it as a branch. And then looking down at the individual conditions, here you can see the individual conditions. So that second block there is dealing with showing you a summary of all the three-way conditions. And it's showing you that you only executed one of them 1,037 times, but the other two you didn't exercise at all. Detailed coverage analysis. So, is Perl hard to read, test and maintain? Only if you choose to make it so, by not applying best practices. Busted. Okay. Now this is a new myth around Perl. Perl 6 is killing Perl 5. Well, that's just crazy. If you know the truth, you'll know that Perl 6 actually saved Perl 5. This is a quote from Larry Wall, who you may or may not know is the original author of Perl. Back in 2000, when the Perl 6 project started, Perl 5 was dying. It was hard to see it from outside the community, but those inside it could see that it was kind of getting stuck. So, what happened then with the Perl 6? Perl 6 started with an RFC process, which generated, I forget how many, but something like 150 proposals. Proposals where people were saying, this is wrong with Perl 5, this is how we should fix it. And that process sort of vented the speed of the community. On the mailing lists, where a lot of people had been bickering about which way to go, all those people who were bickering but not actually doing the work focused on the RFCs. And the people doing the work could just get on with doing the work. Since then, as Perl 6 and Parrot have matured, there's been much refactoring driven by the idea or the goal of putting Perl 5 to run on Parrot, the Parrot virtual machine. And many new features have been added inspired by the Perl 6 work. So now we have Perl 5.10, released last December, 5 years after 5.8 and 2 years after 5.8.8. Perl follows the odd-even convention, so Perl 5.9 was the development releases building up to Perl 5.10. Many fixes, much more speed, much less memory, and a whole bunch of new features, some of which are rather obscure, but given the maturity and the depth of use of Perl within the community, there's a lot of people who rely on these things. I won't go into the list here, but if you're a user of Perl, Perl 5.10 has a lot of good stuff. So another thing that's come out of the Perl 6, and another way in which Perl 6 is saving Perl 5, is that it was realised that Perl 5 needed even better test coverage in order to be able to prove that it ran okay on a new platform, either as Perl 5 being interpreted through Perl 6 or Perl 5 running on Parrot. So it's strengthened this culture of testing and test-driven development, and the development of many of these test modules. This slide could actually have gone back in the previous section. If you're doing any kind of testing with Perl, this is a fabulous book. I won't say more, it's a fabulous book. Give you an example of the size of the Perl test suite. Back in 2002, we had 26,000 tests. Now, 5 years later, 2007, 78,000 tests, and that's just the core language. There's an extra 109,000 tests in the bundled libraries. Now, by way of comparison, Ruby, as far as I know, this is what I was told, has 1,400 core tests, and about, it says here, 14,000 for the library. So Perl has an order of magnitude more tests than Ruby. Python, apparently, it's very hard to work out the actual number of tests because of the way the tests are written. But if the myth is that Perl 6 is killing Perl 5, well, the evidence is strongly against you. So module test suites. We looked at the Perl test suite there. Here we're going to look at the test suites that are supplied with module distributions. Every time you upload a module to CPAN, you're expected to include a test harness. And there's an automated smoke testing of these CPAN uploads, and it runs the test suite on 61 different platforms, 20 different versions of Perl, getting immediate feedback. So if you upload a new distribution and it doesn't work on some obscure version, or even not such obscure version, basically if it doesn't work on a particular version of Perl that you haven't tested, or a particular platform that you haven't tested, you usually get an email about it within a day. Bang. How's that for useful service? So there's also a nice website showing you where your test failures are. This is the platform version analysis for the DBI module. So you can see this is my last release of the DBI module, and it's already been tested on a huge range of Perl versions on a huge range of platforms. A few spurious failures here and there, which are mostly obscure stuff that I'm not too worried about, but really ought to fix. So the point here, valuable services. These are mature services. Test volume, 90,000 of these reports per month. Again, Perl 6 is not killing Perl 5. Busted. Any questions? Stunned silence. Come on, you've got to have a question. I'll get into the Parrot and Perl 6 stuff shortly, but that's kind of the end of this particular bit. How does the coverage analysis work? Coverage analysis works because it's possible to get Perl. Perl is wonderful. Perl is very open to being plugged. So for example, you could plug in a new regular expression engine. You can also plug in a new op tree driver. Basically, the way Perl works is it compiles your Perl into an op tree and then executes the op tree. And the executor for the op tree can be replaced with a different one that then instruments the... Yeah. Actually, having said that, I think that the coverage doesn't work that way. No, actually, it does. It does. The early versions didn't, but the new versions do, because that's how they do the branch analysis and condition analysis. One more slide that I meant to add. I won't comment on the other communities because I don't spend a lot of time in the other communities, but this was a comment I saw on a blog recently. And Perl does have an awesome community. Perl Monks is an excellent place. If you want to get involved in Perl, ask a question there, you'll get fabulous response, no matter how dumb your question is. We all ask dumb questions to start with. Okay, so we busted all those, didn't we? Yes. Okay, any questions? That's where I am. Right. Any more questions? Any curiosity? Is anyone more likely to use Perl now than you were before? 1, 2, 1.5, 2.5. Can I recommend books? Yes. Start with learning Perl. Start with learning Perl and end up with programming Perl. And I think there's a book between the two as well by the same authors. The basic learning Perl is the place to start. And it's in its 3rd or 4th edition now. And programming Perl is in its 3rd edition, I think. So. Yes, yeah, and that testing notebook that I mentioned earlier is also relatively recent, about 2005, but has a lot of the newer things in it. Okay. Is CPAN written in Perl? Yes. Yeah, it's all written in Perl. Everything you saw is written in Perl. Do you get many Perl modules? Yes, a huge number. Yes, the DBI, for example, that's a compiled module. The automated testing, there's 2 ways. It's either done by users who volunteered that whenever they install a module, it'll send off a report. Or some people run smoke servers in virtual machines. So they configure a virtual machine to look like a particular thing, and then it just runs. So whenever you upload, it goes, oh look, an upload, grabs it, unpacks it, builds it, sends off the report. No, they don't. They don't. So what will happen there, if they don't have a particular dependency, then it will, the build will just fail, but it'll fail saying not applicable because I don't have the prerequisites. And there's actually a setup now where there are modules that are effectively aliases for requirements. So you can depend on that module, and if you don't have that module, then it'll say that you don't have the right thing installed. Okay, Perl 6. Now from this slide on, it's all a bit bitty because I was busy trying to put the slides together in the last couple of hours. How many of you have even heard of Perl 6? Okay. Half. Okay, Perl 6 is basically the new version of Perl. Perl 5, 14 years old, Perl itself 21 years old. Perl 6 was started 8 years ago. Almost 9 now. So of course there's naturally the myth that it's never going to happen because it's 8 years and where is it? So we'll look at that. I'll just keep going. Why is it taking so long? Very early on, the decision was taken that rather than rushing to do it to a particular schedule, they would just let it cook, work on it until it felt right. And that's where a lot of the frustration has come from, and eight years later you can understand why people are frustrated. But the fruits of that philosophy are being reaped now. In the last couple of years there have been amazing, subtle but deep changes in the way Perl 6 works and the syntax, the semantics, that have had very profound effects that just simply wouldn't have been possible if Perl 6 had been released by now. Okay, so this is to dispel fears about whether it's not Perl or not. Basically, it is Perl. I won't go into the details now. Actually, how much time do I have? When do we end? It's 1500. Okay, so I actually have an hour. I have an hour. Wow, you guys are going to have a great break. Okay. I tend to do too many slides and then rush through them quick because I get really bored with people who just read the slides and do it really slowly. So I like to read slides quickly, or preferably not read slides at all. But now I have loads of time and not so many slides. So actually we can take a detour off and look at some relevant websites. Okay, one of the amazing things about Perl 6 is that the decision was taken early on that it would be implemented in Perl 6. Now, you'd have to agree that Python isn't implemented in Python and Ruby isn't implemented in Ruby. So the idea of implementing Perl 6 in Perl 6, to implement a scripting language in a scripting language and expect it to be efficient, was a pretty radical idea that a lot of people just thought was crazy. But it's come true, and it's come true because a huge amount of effort has been put into the concept of grammars, reusable grammars, subclassing grammars. extensible grammars. And I'll show you some examples shortly. But as a side effect of that, you can now implement any language in Perl 6 using the same tool chain. And that's what a lot of people are starting to do now. So you hear a lot about domain-specific languages. You know, the Ruby people love domain-specific languages. You will now be able to write in Perl 6 any language, and it would be in an entirely native language, not grafted on half language that sort of sits on the side and isn't quite perfect and has lots of rough edges. You can do anything you like with this. Another point, one of the things about Perl 6 is that Perl 6 is itself a specification, and there are multiple implementations. And the rule is you can call yourself Perl 6 if you pass the test suite. I'll talk about the test suite shortly. Pugs was the initial implementation, written in Haskell, functional programming language. Kind of Perl 6 is written in Perl 5, aiming to self-host eventually, and Rakudo is the new one built on the Parrot compiler toolchain. I'll talk about that shortly. Where has the time gone? Well, here is where 900,000 lines worth of time went in 2 years. Now that's a huge amount of effort by a large community that has yielded amazing results. And one of the most wonderful results that came out of the Pugs work is the test suite. 20,000 tests capturing Perl 6, what it means to be Perl 6. Pugs generates code for Parrot, Perl 5, Lisp and JavaScript, so you can actually run Perl 5 code, not much Perl 5 code, but you can run some in your web browser, in JavaScript, Perl 5. Common test suite, 20,000 tests, 35,000 lines of Perl 6 tests. If people tell you there's no Perl 6 code written, 35,000 lines of tests written in Perl 6. Okay, when will it be done? We hear this a lot, so the standard answer is Christmas. Be done by Christmas. And Larry came up with a good quote recently. People were asking on the mailing list, when is it going to be done? And Larry says, well, we're not doing the waterfall approach, we're doing the whirlpool approach, where we kind of go around and around and around. But the key point is this one about feedback at many levels. Because of the experimental implementations, there's feedback coming in from those implementations that then cause the language to mutate as experience is gained through those experiments. So, in other words, a whirlpool sucks, but the trick is to position yourself over the intended destination. And you'll get there, but you'll be a bit dizzy. So we'll leave Perl 6 for a moment and talk about Parrot. Has anyone heard of Parrot? 1, 2, half a nod there. Come on, show of hands. Have you heard of Parrot? Half of you, okay. Parrot is a virtual machine. Another virtual machine, I hear you groan. You know, why not use, why not use the JVM or the DLR? Well, the answer is that those virtual machines weren't designed for dynamic languages. Now, both of them are sort of stretching themselves in that direction because they see there's an important market there. But they're not written primarily for dynamic languages. Parrot is a virtual machine designed from the ground up for dynamic languages, and with a lot of very sophisticated features like continuation passing, for example. I don't know whether that means anything to you, but apparently it's a hot topic. Also has JIT compiling built in, etc., etc. Already has support for 50 languages, about 20 of which are kind of serious languages like Python, Ruby, PHP, Lua, Lisp, TCL, and again, here's where 8 years of work have gone, or 7 years of work. This is the Parrot development. You can see the pace is picking up. Parrot test suite, 11,000 tests. Actually runs, if you run the full, there are 7 run cores customized for different purposes, so it actually runs 53,000 tests. Okay. Did I say we take testing seriously? Okay, Parrot compiler tools. This isn't an idle boast because somebody did this recently using the new compiler toolchain. The compiler toolchain has kind of gone through several evolutions and has got to the point now where it is the way it's going to be. Is it worth taking a detour now? Oh, I'll come back, I think. Ooh. Oh, look, it says slide 66 of 66. I guess I've come to the end. Right, so I'll show you some pretty pictures. Okay, what I need to do now is displays. Come on, mirroring. Okay, you get to see what I see. No, not that one. Not even that one. This one. Okay. Simon Cousins was a Perl 5 developer for many years, and he had kind of been out of the community for a while. And recently, as in a few days ago, a month ago, he came back and took a look. And basically, I mean, let you read this because he's basically saying it's amazing, it's there, it works, and the promise is being fulfilled. So what I want to show you is some Perl 6 code for the compiler toolchain that implements a language called lolcode. Lolcode is a tiny language for lol. Has anyone heard of lolcats? There you go. So has anyone heard of lolcode? There you go. This is a language, this is lolcode in Perl 6. So what you see here is Perl 6 code. This is a grammar, subclassing from this grammar. And this is a rule, that's a token. There's another rule. Statement terminators. Now this looks like the traditional grammars that you might see parsed by tools like Yak. But this is Perl 6 code. Okay? So there's an if-then. Well, it's an if-then in lol code, which makes it hard to recognize as an if-then. Switch statement, block, parameters, expression, value. So next time somebody tells you there's no Perl 6 code, you can say, well, I've seen lol code implemented in Perl 6. So that's the grammar. And over here we have the actions. Again, Perl 6 code, that's the Perl 6 method. Statements, declare, assign, function, if then, da-de-da-de-da-de-da. And then the final step is the built-ins. Now the built-ins are implemented currently in PIR, which is the Parrot intermediate representation, which is basically assembler code for the Parrot virtual machine. So pretty soon that'll be changed to work at the what's called the not quite Perl. These things are actually a dialect of Perl 6 called not quite Perl, which is a subset designed to help with the bootstrapping process. Because obviously it's hard to write Perl 6 in Perl 6 if you haven't written Perl 6 yet. So not quite Perl 6 is a bootstrapping tool, but that's valid Perl 6 code. So you can see there's only about 5 files make up the whole thing, and I've shown you 3 of them. There's another couple of these built-ins. So that's a compiler written in an afternoon. Okay, hopefully that's reasonably impressive. Any questions? No. Sorry? Shall we implement Perl 6 in lolcode? Now that's an interesting idea. We love volunteers. Come and volunteer. We'll give you a commit bit, just work away. Perl 6 in lolcode, definitely doable. I presume lolcode is Turing complete. So this is a slight diversion back to the Pugs test suite. Did I mention we take testing seriously? This is the... Here we go. This is the smoke test for Pugs and the Perl 6 test suite running on Pugs. So you can see the scroll bar here. There are a lot of tests, and so this smoke test website. So this actual website shows you the smoke tests for all sorts of different versions of Pugs and all sorts of different platforms. This is the particular platform that happens to compile most of them. So the greens you can see here, and you can click on these and go off and see the individual. Let's go take a look, see what happens. I've got no idea. Ooh, that happens. Right. Not so useful. What happens if I do that? Ooh. Don't worry about that. Okay, so have we busted the Perl 6 myths? I think so. Right. Any questions? What would Parrot be useful for right now? That's a good question. And, excuse me, my phone is shouting at me. There we go. What would Parrot be useful for right now? Should you go play with Parrot? Yes, yes, definitely go play with Parrot. Parrot is, if you're interested in virtual machines, full stop. If you're interested in targeting a language to a virtual machine, that makes it very easy to target the language. So if you have some language in mind, the amount of effort required to go from imagining the language to actually having it running is huge. The Parrot compiler toolchain makes it tiny. You know, it really does make implementing a language very fast. And the resulting execution is very fast. I didn't have time to get into collecting benchmarks together, but Parrot is very fast. What people neglect when they run benchmarks often with Parrot is that the default build is a debugging build. And there's layers of optimization like the JIT compiler that aren't enabled by default. Okay, the branch coverage is for Perl 5. Okay, so I don't know. I don't have an answer for you whether there's branch analysis for Parrot, but you could add it. You know, commit bits dished out freely. So, do you have anything particular in mind?
Well, I mean, I wrote DSL,
Okay.
Which is fine. I'm just curious if
Okay, so you're writing a DSL using Antler and Java. Okay. Take a look. Take a look at the Parrot compiler toolchain. It's hard to get. The Parrot community isn't great at keeping up-to-date documentation and kind of references to let newcomers come on board easily. So drop me an email and I'll send you some links. Okay. Any other questions? Have the Parrot folks been talking to the PyPy folks? Well, you know, the funny thing is that in the early days of Parrot, there was a competition. And the competition was that it was a challenge given at OSCON that within 1 year, Parrot would be able to run some Python tests written by Guido faster than Python. Okay. Now that was an amazing challenge. Okay, to A that you do it at all, B that you do it faster, and C that you would let the author of the language pick his own tests. Okay. Now I think from memory we ran some of the tests faster and some of them slower, and a couple didn't pass. So the answer is yes, there is communication going on, but that was like 5 years ago, and that length of time ago we almost passed. So I'm not sure what the state of the PHP implementation on Parrot is.
I know the PyPy project, they've been doing some very sophisticated flow analysis of code, and the problem is that you can get very close to the given performance of in similar probably the faster or slower than the existing language. The tricky bit is getting past that point, and sort of the broader vision in terms of such a
Right.
I'm curious to see much communication. They seem to go off in different directions.
So you're saying PyPy have been exploring performance issues, but they've had trouble getting past the existing Python.
It's a tricky problem.
Yeah.
PyPy sadly beats Python, and in fact C compiles C code for certain problems. So that's why PyPy is very popular as a specialized compiler for certain tasks. They use Python as a super Python, just sort of like not by Perl.
Right.
And writing stuff like that, you can do some very fast financial statistical analysis that you can't do using But they find that when they implement certain other things like sticks or strings, you find that gets a lot harder to
Right.
map performance and see implementation.
Well, Dix and string. I mean, strings, for example, Parrot and Perl take Unicode very seriously. So the guy here, Zend, was talking about Zend and the Zend framework, and oh dear, we kind of forgot to do Unicode. Oops, you know, there's no excuse for that these days. So the short answer is I don't have an answer about the relative performance now, but I did. Oops, let's try picking the right thing. Oops. I did find this example that he tries to do with the wrong hand. There you go. Now this is slightly old, But it gives you an example of performance. This is a Fibrossini series, just a little maths, a tiny maths example. It's outdated, I'm sure. I've got no idea what version of Python that was or what compiler options we used to build it. But you can see here that we're getting pretty impressive performance. And that was, I think, 2 years ago, maybe 3. So, yeah, I just offer that out there as a sample. I've got no idea the background.
Does anyone use it in production?
Does anyone use Parrot in production? Actually, yes. One of the leading authors, Dan Sagowski, used it, has used it in production for about 4 years or more, I'd say. Working for a company that had their own kind of specialised language. He wrote, he re-implemented that to run on top of Parrot. So it has been in production, but generally the answer is no. But it's getting to that point.
Getting from the almost not quite general purpose space is actually really hard.
Yes, yeah. So just getting over that threshold of becoming adopted mainstream.
Yeah, it's kind of extended from the mind-making code analysis system design here. It's an interpreted language, or any language to dynamic flow space, interpreted space to any other language. So you sort of feed in Java and .NET, Python. I don't know
You've just reminded me of something very important about Parrot. Because Parrot is aiming to be a virtual machine for all dynamic languages that many languages can target, one of the key goals is interoperability between the languages. Okay, so if you take CPAN, 14,000 distributions, huge library of quality code, some of it not so good, but a lot of it very good code. Wouldn't it be great to be able to access that from Python, Ruby, PHP, Tickle? Any language targeting. Similarly, if you're writing Perl code, through Parrot you can target Ruby libraries, PHP libraries, Python libraries. So there's a potential huge win there. So one of the things that I'm trying to work on slowly is creating a database interface for Parrot that would then become a common database interface for all the languages, and each language could then have a little adapter sitting on top. Because at the moment, Perl, Python, Ruby, PHP, Tickle, they all reinvent the wheel in terms of database interfaces. Better to have one set of common drivers with little adapters sitting on top. But that's it's kind of a longer term project of mine. Any more questions?
Do you think there's more than one way to do it philosophy has an impact on Perl's reputation for readability?
Does there's more than one way to do it philosophy have an impact on
Perl's reputation.
Perl's reputation?
For example, if there's 100 common ways to do a common task, then surely you have to know all 100 to be able to read the average code base.
Okay, do you have to know 100 ways to read the average code base? Well, in theory, yes. Worst case scenario, yes. In practice, there are only a few ways. I mean, it comes back to responsibility, freedom and responsibility. The developer has the freedom to write the code in 100 different ways. Okay. But the developer has the responsibility to write it clearly. But the key point then is that a good developer will choose the way that best expresses the problem, not the way that the language forces them to implement the problem. And this is where the value of Perl comes in. So on the one hand, you could say you have the freedom, and some developers could abuse the freedom and just write crappy code. You also have the freedom, and you can use the freedom to express the algorithm in the best way that captures the essence of the algorithm, rather than the way the language forces you to do it.
So I suppose what I'm really wondering is, the last time I used Perl was a very long time ago, so 6 or 7 years ago. And every time I found a new chunk of Perl code to read to see how it worked, I almost felt to a certain extent like I was back to learning the language again. I switched over to styles and feature usage and everything changed automatically. Has there been does the average code base follow more common usage patterns these days?
Yes, there is a convergence in usage patterns to the best practices. I mean, that's one of the big spin-offs of the best practices philosophy, or kind of the community's interest in best practices and testing. So yeah, I'd say there has been a convergence. And if you're stuck with an old code base, what I would do is run it through Perl Tidy, run it through Perl Critic. Yeah. And then there's also, if it's really bad code, there's a module called b:\d:\obfuscate, which can be used for renaming variables and basically kind of unpacking the control flow slightly. So there are tools available that let you kind of get up to speed with a code base that's poorly written. But hopefully these days, as the code churns and you're dealing with newer code, it's converging, the style is converging. So there are fewer examples of really bad code out there.
The other question I have is, what are the big differences between Perl 5 and Perl 6? What is Perl 6 giving us that Perl 5 does?
Oh boy, what are the differences between Perl 5 and Perl 6? That's a question that would need a whole talk of its own. So let me just see if I can. Oh, oops, no, that's entirely the wrong talk. Okay. Oops, helps if I hit this button. Ooh, helps if I press the spacebar too. There we go. So it is undoubtedly a bigger language. Okay, and I wish I had a slide with a feature list. The problem with writing a slide for a feature list of Perl 6 is that it looks like Fantasyland. Because what is on offer is it's a radical advancement in the state of the art. I tend to view Python, Ruby, Python, Ruby, Java, modern general purpose dynamic languages, right, including Java, including Pascal, all the languages that we've had in the last 20 years are essentially very similar. Various kinds of objects bolted on, but essentially very similar. Perl 6, and this is going to sound unbelievable, but Perl 6 really is advancing the state of the art to a new generation. And I can't justify that to you with a couple of slides and a few minutes. You would need, I'd need an hour, but I could talk about. Ooh, hang on, look, haha, haha. I will come up with a feature list for you now. I have to pause for a moment and think where it is. Okay. What's time, by the way? Oh, we have time. Great. Okay. This is how I read mail. That's how I read 2/3 of my mail. Okay. Okay. No, hold on. There we go. Okay. So here's a guy saying, I think Perl 6 will kill off Perl. It's a great shame. The developers, that's where the developers are coming from. This was my response. These are the interesting things. Perl 6 has all the things you'd expect a modern language to have. These are the things you might not expect it to have. Continuation passing, flow control. Now you might not be familiar with that, it would take a while to explain it, but basically you can do amazing things with flow control. Resumable exceptions, you can read it for yourself. The object-oriented grammar you've already seen some examples of. You can subclass a grammar. And just that very concept, subclassing a grammar, where the elements within the grammar are methods, and you could override the individual ones to create a new grammar. Radical. Function carrying is straightforward. Hyper-operators. It has hyper-operators built in that are designed to be able to work with vector processing engines. So modern trend towards scalability, multiple cores, signal processing and graphic processing chips being coupled tightly to general purpose CPUs. Perl 6 has been designed to allow individual operations to be passed off to vector processors. Junctions, superpositions, single values that actually hold sets of values simultaneously. And when you pass one of these to a function, it will auto-thread the function across all the elements in the set and then combine the results back. You know, hard to explain, powerful concepts. Lazy evaluations, virtual lists, no problem. You know, 1 dot dot infinity, no problem. Just, you know, don't expect to do anything with the end of the list. Full meta-object protocol, constraints, pre- and post-conditions, roles. It has perhaps the most sophisticated implementation of roles in any mainstream language, and thing that hasn't come out of. I mean, you know, there's some university languages that are focused on implementing roles and traits. Perl 6 has it, and has it very well done. Both runtime and compile time composition of roles. So basically, do you do objects through inheritance, or mix-ins, or delegation, etc., etc. Roles gives you a whole new way of handling composition of objects. Very powerful. Full Unicode with graphemes. I mean, a lot of people don't even know about graphemes in terms of handling Unicode, but basically it's a very high-level view of Unicode characters. A Unicode character can consist of kind of like a base character with a whole bunch of marks composed on top of it. Normally you would have to process that. If you were writing code in Java, PHP, Ruby, Python, whatever, you would have to process the primary character and the secondary marks separately, because they would appear to you as different characters. In Perl 6, they all appear as one character, a grapheme, a composed character. Now this makes handling text so much simpler. You know, now, a lot of Americans, you know, they're not used to this concept of accents, but in terms of languages, like the Asian languages, Chinese languages, these things are hugely important. Any questions? Does this help answer the question of how Perl 6 is different? You know, this is why it's taken so long to get it right. And it'd be very easy to come up with this list and go, yeah, we'd love to have all these things, and so we'll come up with some language that throws it all in to the pot. What's been happening in Perl 6 is that the pot has been left to simmer for years while implementation work has been done, and the implementation work is then fed back in. Okay? And writing the test suite has given feedback on what it's like to work with these constructs. So the end result is that Perl 6 melds these issues together, melds these design elements together in a very elegant and powerful way. And in a way that has much more consistency than people will come to expect from Perl 6. There's an old quote of Larry Walls that Perl 6 will consistently give you what you want unless you want consistency. You know, Perl 6 will give you much more consistency. It's a much bigger language, but it should be much easier to learn, because when you learn something, it's true all the way up the learning curve. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Any questions at all about anything? Sorry? When's it out? Christmas. Christmas. Not quite sure which, but I mean,
That is the big question I had right now. I'm looking at pictures of something that's very interesting. You mentioned that's something looking at Perl 6, but it's been how many years now?
8 since the announcement was made.
I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, do I want to go spend a month of evenings reading Perl 6 and learning what it's saying, and wait another 4 or 5 years? Or are there anything to take with that?
Okay. You won't have to wait 4 or 5 years. I don't believe you'd have to wait more than 1. Seriously, you know, I hate to say it, but I think it's this Christmas. You know? So, sue me if I'm wrong. The Parrot compiler toolchain is the last major piece of the low-level components needed to let the language kind of flourish, you know, to expand the base of the language. So There is a lot more work to be done, but in terms of being able to write Perl 6 and run it on something, you know, might not be terribly fast, might not have in fact, it won't have all these features, but it will be usable. That's the key point.